show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Salaam Alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
Salam Rasulullah. In the name of Allah, and peace and blessing of Allah be upon His last and final messenger, family, friends, foes, haters, and hateettes. Welcome back to the Feachaz. I greet you all in peace and love with no hatred in my heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before we begin, please like, please subscribe, and please share. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here. Now, family, wow. Africa has finally arrived. Africa has put Africa on the map. And ironically enough, it is black, not just black Africa, but in large part, black Muslim Africa. And we wanted to talk about this situation with Niger from the time it happened, but we were waiting because we know historically how these things can go awry. But what we are seeing now is the changing of the guard. And we're witnessing this happening in real time. The story of the globe today is not Ukraine. Ukraine is kind of a manufactured European mess. And Ukraine is essentially a situation where the old Nazi element of Western Europe, you know, like you have your old white supremacist element from the European Union and whatnot, still believing that they can expand their powers into Eastern Europe or Eastern Asia, rather, with Russia and whatnot. Right? They still think it's like post World War II. And so when Vladimir Putin, when he annexed Ukraine, the European Union had to react. And how did they react? By funding this war with almost unlimited financial resources and military support and whatnot. And while their eye was on Ukraine, what was going on in Africa, people? What was going on in Africa? What was going on in Africa was the former colonized slave nations did not look for a symbolic independence. They looked for a real independence. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody in the comment section. Talking about the comment section, let me see y'all comment in the chat. Give me some salams or something in the chat. Pardon me, and likes. So today, why we're talking about this today, after the Niger coup, some weeks after, was a major news break has just hit. Major news break. And this just goes to show that Africa is forming like Voltron. You know Voltron Force? Y'all know Voltron Force, right? Africa's forming like Voltron, right? First it was Mali, Mali started kicking out the French. Then it was Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso started kicking out all the French. But really, it started with Mali. You know, Mali, as you know, is a very ancient empire. You know, it was a superpower from Mansa Musa and whatnot. They kicked out the French. Then Niger decided that its puppet leader and their democratic services were no longer needed. And the people supported the military coup. When the people support the military coup, you know a change is coming. You know a change is coming. Ain't talking about it anymore. So we were waiting basically to see the moves that, you know, the old white supremacist powers would do. And right now, that old white supremacist money is panicking. Absolutely panicking. Because they try to get their puppet leaders in Nigeria to turn on their brothers in Niger. And while the puppet leaders were speaking with the voices of the puppet masters, the people were saying a different song. The people were saying something completely different. And what we're seeing now, right before our eyes, is while Africa is ready to fight for their liberation and fight tooth and nail, the old colonial democratic Zaddy powers are fighting a war of attrition against their own people. And you can never, ever win a war trying to usurp people's liberation while your own people are fighting a war of attrition against you. Impossible. We're going to start off reading from one of the most influential French minds, okay? French intellectuals. This is probably one of the most important books on political philosophy ever. Okay, one it's up there. It's up there with the Prince. It's up there with the Crowd, right? This book is called The Politics of Obedience, a Discourse of Voluntary Servitude by a French, from France, Mr. Etienne de la Boétie. Okay? Etienne de la Boétie. Okay? A very important book in political philosophy. So he writes in his book, okay, what a monstrous vice is this that when not even deserve to be called cowardice, a vice for which no term can be found vile enough, which nature herself disavows, and our tongues refuse to name. Place on one side, this is what he's saying, this is back in 1895, I believe. 1895, he wrote this book. Place in one side 50,000 armed men, and another the same number, and let them join in battle on the side fighting to retain liberty, and the other to take it away. To which would you, at a guess, promise victory? Which men do you think would march more gallantly into combat? Those who anticipate as a reward for their suffering the maintenance of their freedom, or those who cannot expect any other prize for their blows exchanged than the enslavement of others. This right here, this right here is what France is facing today. If you go into Africa today, your only reward will be the enslavement of others. While those people who you're fighting, they're not like you. You both might believe in God, but you don't worship the same God. You're not asking that God for the same things. And the God answers the call of the oppressed. Those poor, decrepit, dirty, raggedy Africans are ready to fight you in all your glory and all your weapons. So much so that when you sought help from the Nigerian army, the Nigerian military, we saw some of their soldiers put out on social media their support for the people that they're going to fight. There's a new day. There's a new day. So let's read this story, yo. Let me get this up here. 1 second, yo. So this happened today. Gabon coup. Army seizes power from Ali Bongo and puts him in house arrest. Now, this Mr. Ali Bongo, okay, of Gabon, has been in power, I think, for like at least 3 decades, if I'm not mistaken. And he is infamous for basically giving what is underneath the feet of Africans to white folks in Europe, particularly France, in terms of natural resources like oil and other such natural resources, like the rest of the puppet leadership in Africa does. So Gabon's President Ali Bongo has appealed for help. Of course he has, after the army deposed him in a coup and put him under house arrest. Speaking on Wednesday, from what he said in was his residence, urged supporters, raise your voice. Early, the army officers appeared to TV and say they have taken power. They said they annulled the results of Saturday's election in which Mr. Bongo was declared the winner, but the opposition claimed it was fraudulent. The officers also said it had arrested one of Mr. Bongo's sons for treason. Later, they announced that Mr. Bongo would be replaced by the head of Presidential Guard, General Brice Odigay Ngume, who was earlier carried triumphantly through the streets of the capital, Libreville. They said Thursday that the people of Gabon will once again be free to go about their businesses between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but traffic restrictions will remain in place for now. Mr. Bongo's overthrow would end the family's 55-year, excuse my français, okay? I thought it was 3 decades. It is 55-year hold on power in Gabon. Remember what I told you, that these folks, these devils, all they do, the only thing they export is democracy and the weapons to uphold it. And the reason why they do that is so that they can exploit the resources of alleged third world countries in order to keep those third world countries poor and them rich. So you can imagine the world's uranium, the world's petrol, the world's chocolate, the world's rubber, world's diamonds, the world's cocoa, all of this coming out of Africa. And Africans are running around with white folks cast off clothes. Can you imagine? Meanwhile, in the very same Africa, where this is happening, look what our so-called Tunisian Muslim country brothers are doing. Look at this. EU, Tunisia signs 1 billion pounds, it's pound deal, to fight illegal migration. That's what the Tunisians are doing. Not a single one of your YouTubians would dare touch this. Not one. Not a single one of your YouTubians would dare touch this, not even with a 10-foot pole. Your YouTubians are busy talking about Saudi Arabia. That's what they're busy doing. And Saudi Arabia, should they be talking? Yeah, they should be talked about, of course. But not to take the pressure off of your own folks out there in Tunisia who are blatantly calling to white supremacy in Africa, mind you, and Arab supremacy. In Africa, of all places. Leaders of the EU want a strategic pact with Tunisian President Kais Saied to stem the flow of migration to Europe. When they say migration, they mean Negroes. They mean black folks. They mean the darkies. They don't want to see black Africans up in Europe no more. And so while Black Africa is uniting against the French colonial powers, here come Tunisia to take their blood money. Here they come. But what will end up happening, for those of y'all who are following what's going on in the world today, there's a new currency coming out to compete with the US dollar from the BRICS nations. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. And there are several countries that have applied to join BRICS. One of those countries just happens to be one of the pillars of the petrodollar in Saudi Arabia. Now, we mentioned before that we believe the reason why Saudi, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, is not even a king, is a crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman and whatnot, is acting so belligerent in Saudi. Well, the reason why we believe that is because of peak oil. So while your YouTubian da'i elites are saying, oh, Islam this and rock concert that, whatever, rap concert and all this kind of nonsense, all this stuff that really don't mean anything, and Halloween and stuff like that. What Saudi Arabia is trying to do is they are trying to divorce themselves from oil profits to diversify their economy before the oil runs out. That's why they're acting so crazy. That's what them shooting up hundreds of Ethiopian migrants is about. In cold blood. Hundreds. That's what that's about. That's what them getting so heavily invested in this culture war is about. Inviting rappers and paying billions of dollars in salaries to bring the top soccer or football players, whatever you want to call it, into Saudi Arabia to play for them. And at the same time, while they're paying soccer players millions, they're also spending millions to shoot migrants in cold blood at the same time. Saudi Arabia, people. That's Saudi Arabia. But what we are saying is that your Tubian that elites, they're not about the truth. They're about dogma. They're about ideology. They have taken ideological positions which prevents them from talking about any other country except for Saudi Arabia. You get it? So they can't talk about Pakistan accepting 200 million rather. Is it million? Yeah, 200 million from the United States to push LGBT in Pakistan. They can't talk about that. They can't talk about Tunisia accepting 1 billion euros in Tunisia to prevent Black Africans from going to Europe, from escaping colonialism, which was caused by Europeans to begin with. They can't talk about that. They can't talk about Libya and Libyans enslaving Black Africans. And not only that, forcing Black African women, including Muslims, into prostitution. They can't talk about that. But what they can do is run behind some disgusting zaddies all over the internet, like Andrew Tate. You know what I mean? All up in his crotch and stuff. They can do that stuff. They know very well how to chase the clout. But they don't know how to stand up for what's correct. But I digress. This is what Tunisia's doing. This is what they're doing. Top EU politicians traveling to Tunisia signed a memorandum of understanding Sunday for strategic comprehensive cooperation between the bloc of the North African country in the fight to stem illegal migration to Europe. Illegal migration. It's so stunning. Like, stunning doesn't even begin to describe the European and their outlook on illegal immigration, or migration rather. Illegal migration to Europe. These folks, there would be no such thing as illegal migration if Europeans never colonized these countries to begin with. Illegal migration, the very first, not just illegal migrants, but oppressive migrants happen to be the white supremacists. They went throughout the earth like they owned it. They are still in South Africa up until this very day. Folks like Elon Musk 7% of the South African population owning 95% of the wealth and the land. And they want to tell, so they can go anywhere that they want on earth. On earth. Take whatever they need, take whatever they want from natural resources and human resources. Whip up all kinds of diseases in labs and whatnot to wipe out the populations, like smallpox and AIDS and Ebola, and more recently, COVID. YouTube, don't shut me down, okay? The cocoa, okay? The cocoa, YouTube, don't shut me down, okay? There's these folks. They create the conditions that make life on Earth hell to live in, and then complain when all of the spoils of war that end up in their countries, people are leaving the countries that they looted for their countries. They complain about that. And why do they complain about that? It's because they're black. Make no mistake about it. Did they stem the illegal migration into Europe from the Ukraine? Did they go to the Ukraine and offer the president of Ukraine 1 billion euros to stop Ukrainians from going into Europe? Or did they do like they did in Britain, offer British families money? We will pay you to take these Ukrainians in your homes and treat them as our guests. Is that what they did? They don't see black Africans or black people in general as human beings. That's the whole point of white supremacy. The point of white supremacy is that the white race is superior and the black race is the inferior. We didn't make up the rules. We didn't write the literature. So they want to talk about illegal migration. What they mean is, nigga, go back to Africa. That's what they mean. Outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, that's the Prime Minister of Italy, accompanied European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on a trip to Tunis, the trio's second in a month. While in Tunis, the delegation held talks with President Kais Saied on how to tackle the growing problem. You know how you can tackle the growing problem? Leave Africa alone. Leave Africa alone. I promise you that growing problem will solve itself. I promise you. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Do you think this will be the event that starts a worldwide ripple effect toward a global meltdown? Well, the global meltdown has already started. It started about, I want to say, really, you could say this global meltdown started right when George Bush decided to go into Iraq and Afghanistan. That's when everything kind of went downhill from there. Right? So what we're seeing now are the global effects of all of that. Because again, this didn't happen in a bubble. You're talking about centuries worth of history all culminating to what is going on in Africa today to bring us to this event today. So now, the same thing that's going on in Europe is the same thing that's going on here in Canada and in the US, where a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, or whatnot, Joe Biden had a meeting with Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada here. Okay. And the meeting was about migration, the migration problem. Canada don't have no migration problem. We never did historically. We ain't got no migration problem, right? But the second that meeting ended and the Zaddy from the States made his demands on little brother Justin Trudeau, we have had serious problems with migration in Canada. For the first time in Canadian history, refugees are sleeping on the streets in Toronto, thanks to Joe Biden. Remember what we said? We're telling you right here, right now. If it wasn't for these folks, there would be no such thing as illegal migration. They are the original illegal migrants all over the world. You think Canada is a European country, or even America is a European country? It might be majority white folks, yes. But that is because of illegal migration, okay? Well, you can't really say illegal. You call it immoral then. We can call it immoral migration of white folks from Europe into the Americas. That's what caused the demographic shift. They came with the full intention of taking over. And then when they culled the native populations, and through the stroke of a pen through the Homestead Act, gave millions of acres of free land to white folks, while making sure black people didn't get not even a blade of grass. Now they want to complain, well, the demographics is changing. Can you believe the audacity? Can you believe that? The audacity. Your population, because of genocide, because you decided that this was yours. Look in Australia, look in New Zealand, look in the US, look in Canada. Are any of these countries historically white? How did they become white? And now you want to complain about illegal migration? What you are really worried about, as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, you're worried about white genetic annihilation. That's what you're worried about. You are afraid that you will be outnumbered. And black folk, of course, we naturally don't even think like that. We don't care, right? But this is something that's in you. And so you even say it in your speech. The great replacement theory. People just want to live, they want to live a peaceful life. You don't let them live in peace in their own countries so that you can have your chocolate and your Apple iPhones, and whatnot, under the whatchamacallit, the enslavement of black children going into mines and digging up cobalt so you can have your electronics for very, very cheap while giving them nothing. So now when these folks say, I can't live like this, let me go to Britain, let me go to France, let me go to Italy, these places where They taught us this language, and we're living it up rich. You don't want them to live in their countries, and you don't want them to live in your countries. Illegal immigration. Y'all are some devils. Y'all are some real devils. Ain't nobody thinking about their great replacing anybody. They just want to live. And you don't want them to live. You want to be enslaved. So you will spend 1 billion to a Tunisian sellout, wannabe Muslim, to make sure black migrants don't go to Europe. And what happened in France recently, people? Do y'all know what happened in France recently? Who knows what happened in France? Somebody put it in the chat, please. What happened in France very recently? This is all connected. Somebody put in the chat what happened in France, I think yesterday or the day before. Big news in France. This is all connected. Somebody put in the chat, please. Well, I keep going here. Meanwhile, while Tunisia's taking blood money to make sure the culling of black Africans continues, thank you, mind of me. The abaya ban. Do you think that this abaya ban just came out of nowhere? Why, out of all things, is the French government so concerned with abayas all of a sudden? If you look at the French colonies, you have Algeria, you have Tunisia, you have Morocco, you have Niger, you have Cote d'Ivoire, you have Gabon. Well, Gabon, we're not going to talk about Gabon, but you have all these countries from Africa. The majority of them are Muslim. The vast majority of these countries that French colonizes, they're Muslim countries. The vast majority. If you look at the countries that are rebelling against France today, they are the black African Muslim countries, except for Gabon. Gabon is mostly Christian, but the alleged leader is allegedly Muslim, right? But they have a large Muslim population. I think like 10% in Gabon. Okay. If you look at the riots they had recently, the young man who was shot was Muslim from Africa, which caused those riots. Black Africans are basically showing their willingness to stand up against these wicked oppressors. So, in typical wicked oppressor fashion, what does the wicked oppressor do? The wicked oppressor never reflects and turns to Allah, even though they have ample time to do it. What they do is that they increase in their oppression, and Allah mentions that in the Quran. They don't make tawbah, they increase in it. And once you see the oppressor increasing in their oppression, then those who turn to Allah, it's only a matter of time before Allah gives those who turn to Him against the oppressors everything that the oppressor owns and then some. It's only a matter of time. And meanwhile, what is Russia? What is the president of Russia doing? While France and the US and UK are losing their minds, Russia now has forgiven $23 billion in debt owed by African countries. Do you see the chess play here? While the old devilish colonial powers are still holding on to their oppressive tactics, here come Russia forgiving debt, essentially saying, you're not going to be a debt slave to us. You're going to be business partners. I thought they already had a hijab ban anyway. Yes, they did. They already had a hijab ban. That is correct. And Quebec here in Canada follows suit, like they always do. Like they always do. So this is a cultural war. Because in Islam, we don't just bow down to oppression. Not like these Utopian elites. They want to kowtow and essentially side with oppressors. They don't want to fight oppressors. They want to join them. Like 99% of your Utopian elites are like this. They cozy up and ingratiate right-wingers now. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable and shameful and disgusting. They're out here submitting to white supremacy, and meanwhile, relinquishing any type of argument against oppression against black folk. As a matter of fact, your Utopian elites run defense for the white supremacist. Look at Abdullah Andalusi. CRT is Marxism. Marxism, he's saying. In Islam, if you want to find out about a thing, right, you have to go directly to the source. This is what the whole science of Isnad is based upon that. Right? It's not the chain of narration, right? Getting the information from the source directly. So if somebody is culturally compromised or ideologically compromised, you'd be able to tell simply by the way that they speak. Only a few key words you can tell automatically what this person is about. And in 2023, with the rise of social media and the weaponizing of social media against entire societies, what we have is the rampant manufacturing of echo chambers. So what you find now, you'll hear alleged Muslim da'is give entire lectures, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they won't quote not a single ayah of Quran or a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, but they will quote whoever their zaddy is. Ideologically, they will quote that. And they will say some of the most outlandish things, like CRT is Marxism. And when you challenge them on that with very basic, simple questions, right? Some of y'all saw when I went on the Angry Man channel, right? And Angry Man, I was very shocked to find out that Angry Man, he deleted that live. Okay. But I have that reputation. I will do some live with somebody and then they will just delete it afterwards. Even though I'm not swearing or speaking out of pocket or nothing, I'm being very cordial. But they just like it's the exposure that they're afraid of. You know what I mean? Because we're not here in an echo chamber. We are here just speaking the truth. That's it. So they brought up the same thing on the Anchorman channel. You know that because I know automatically once somebody says that CRT is Marxism, they're alt-righter. You don't have to ask anything else. You don't have to ask any, you know. And what we teach you guys here is that ask these folks for their receipts. It's very important. Where is your work against white supremacy? Oh, you don't have no resume against white supremacy? Okay, that's all I need to know. So the second he said, because Angry Man, he's right leaning, right? Right leaning politically. The second is his guest said that CRT is Marxism. I knew already he was in an echo chamber. So what I did on Angry Man's channel, mind you, Angry Man has got like what, almost 600,000 subs, right? I went and I got the actual definition from 3 different reputable sources, right? Britannica was one of them. I think New York Times, and I can't remember the other one, right? But anyways, 2 or 3, anyways, right? And I said, what I said was that CRT is basically using the law, or the study of how historically the law was used to promote racism. That's what I said. And the definition were saying exactly the same thing. Why? Because I went to the source. I didn't go to an echo chamber. I went to the source. When I brought that, the silence was awkward. Just like these guys, Abdullah Andalusi and whatnot, they have this type of look that appeals to immigrants because immigrants look like them. You got me? Even though they're not immigrants. And immigrants, they like anything white. That's how they are. They immigrants want to ingratiate themselves and be close to whiteness. That's why after 9/11, it was the immigrants that started shaving off the beards and taking off their hijabs. It was them. They didn't want to lose their green cards or their visas, nothing like that. It was them. They're afraid. They're scared. Now, you have the second generation, third generation immigration. They ain't afraid to lose their green cards anymore because they're naturalized citizens of the West. And how did they show us brotherhood? By aligning themselves with actual white supremacists. This is your Tunisian leadership. This is your Libyan leadership. This is your Egyptian leadership. You get it? It's only Islamic Brotherhood when we are giving them money. But let us ask for money for our own community. Let's go to the Pakistani community to ask for money for a black masjid, or the Egyptian community to ask for money for a black masjid. Or you'll see how they laugh you out there, masajid. Here come this white man all the way from Moscow for giving $23 billion in debt owed by African countries. 23 billion. While the Arab Muslim country, alleged Arab Muslim country, takes 1 billion pounds to make sure that black Africans don't go to Europe. Understand the world that you live in today. Understand the world that you live in today. But family, There's so much to say, but so little time. I gotta go make salat. I gotta go pray. Right? So Jazakallah khair. Thanks for joining me tonight. Well, I'm coming on live tomorrow, inshallah. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.